My affluent spouse dared me, declaring I couldn't endure 7 days minus him. I merely placed my fobs upon the ledge of the residence he financed. The following morning, his superior and parent were in chaos, phoning incessantly. Plus, currently the lender is buzzing endlessly. What precisely did you urge her toward accomplishing? You couldn't endure 7 days minus me, Lena. Brock placed downward his glass goblet, the Glenfiddich within capturing the glow from our pendant lamp. Minus my funds, my networks, my safeguard. You'd become nothing once more. Merely an additional attractive visage serving meals or responding calls. He adjusted his Armani necktie, anticipating for me to plead, to weep, to vow I'd never exit. Rather, I extended into my Gucci purse and extracted my fobs. Residence BMW. I arranged them upon our marble ledge, everyone clacking versus the rock. You're correct, I stated. Let's discover. The hue faded from his visage as I strolled toward the entrance, abandoning all he'd purchased me following. However, that occurred 3 hours prior. Presently, I rested in the foyer of the Grand Hyatt, observing the surveillance video upon my device. Indeed, I possessed entry to our attic lenses, an additional item Brock never realized I comprehended. He was striding our galley, lifting the fobs, placing them downward, phoning somebody. Likely Derek. Perhaps his parent. Certainly not the authorities, since what would he utter? My spouse abandoned her fobs and strolled out. The porter neared with a soft grin. Miss Voss, your room is prepared. My birth surname seemed odd upon my lips when I'd created the booking this dawn, but it belonged to me. The single item Brock couldn't acquire or vend or exchange. I'd compensated with my personal funds, 6 digits gathered from what Brock termed my adorable, tiny pastime of market speculating. He'd chuckle at gatherings, inform folks I toyed with shares similar to other spouses toyed sports. No one realized I'd converted his starting stipend of $10,000 into sufficient to exist upon for decades. The room was tinier than our attic, but vastly greater in potential. I placed downward my solitary valise, the one I'd concealed at my fitness center months prior, gradually packing it with necessities each trip. Brock tracked our charge accounts but never doubted fitness outings. Ultimately, prize spouses required to preserve their worth. My device vibrated. 17 ignored calls presently. I erased his entry, observed his digits turn merely numerals upon a display. The initial recording activated unintentionally when I attempted to mute it. Lena, this is absurd. Return residence. We'll discuss whatever distressed you. His tone possessed that restrained trait, like he was managing an unstable asset rather than a spouse. By the 5th communication, the restraint was fracturing. You can't simply depart. 50% of all is in both our titles. You require my endorsement also. I erase them entirely. The dawn seemed like a separate existence. I'd arisen at 6 a.m. as usual, solitary in our oversized Monarch mattress since Brock had dozed in his library once more, encircled by screens displaying late-night dealings in Kyoto. The brew device was previously scheduled. Despite what he informed his pals, I'd mastered to utilize every gadget in that galley. He asserted I couldn't run a broiler at last month's supper gathering. Everybody chortled, even me, the dutiful spouse who understood her position. I'd positioned at our ground-to-roof panes 23 levels up, observing the metropolis rouse. The satin gown he'd presented me for holiday irritated versus my epidermis. Luxury brand incorrect dimension selected by his aide, who assumed all spouses donned dimension small. Today was our commemoration for years. He hadn't referenced it once this period, but I'd ceased anticipating him to recall after year 2. The philanthropy midday meal and request rested upon our stone ledge, another mandatory appearance where I'd grin while the spouses contrasted holiday residences. Gloria Davenport would inquire about my tiny pastime with that condescending grin. Still toying with your device shares, darling, she'd utter, not realizing I'd earned more this period than her spouse's oral clinic. That's when I resolved to arrange Brock's library, searching for our coverage papers. He was always meticulous about his area, all organized precisely thus. The audio device rested upon his bureau. That tiny metallic gadget he utilized for significant ideas. When I bumped it over, extending for folders, it rattled onto the stone ground and commenced broadcasting. His tone packed the space mid-discussion. She requested to view our asset reports yesterday. Chuckling. I informed her they were too intricate. Plenty of figures. He truly trusted me. Derek, I could obtain her to transfer her organs, and she just inquired what instrument to utilize. My palms had quivered as I lifted it, viewed the time. Last Wednesday, the day I delivered him midday meal at his workplace, startling him with his preferred sashimi. He'd appeared so delighted, presenting me to his fresh examiner as the gorgeous Mrs. Beaumont. Now I grasped the sneer upon the examiner's visage. The audio continued proceeding. That's why this kind is ideal, Brock proceeded. Attractive sufficient for pictures, foolish enough to manage, appreciative enough to remain silent. My parent instructed me properly. We'd allure lease intellect. I'd positioned the device back precisely where it had tumbled, slanted exactly how he abandoned it. Then I'd located the coverage papers and something additional, a dossier labeled premarital revisions, papers dated last period, adding provisions about desertion, loss of possessions if I departed minus valid reason already certified, with my endorsement falsified, but skillfully so. Positioning in that library, encircled by proof of his achievement and my triviality, something solidified. He wasn't merely disdainful or harsh. He was methodical. I was an asset, and he was already scheduling my devaluation. The grand room possessed a vista of our structure. I could observe our attic from here, illuminations blazing as Brock likely ripped through his workplace, searching for indications of what I'd acquired. He wouldn't discover any. I'd only snapped papers, only duplicated files to networks he didn't realize existed. The actual pilfering would arrive afterward lawfully through the 50% of all he'd placed in my title for levy advantages. My device rang once more, this time Harold Beaumont, Brock's parent, phoning individually. I permitted it ring, recalling how he'd presented me at his recent gathering. Brock's spouse. Attractive item, isn't she? Like I was a jacket or a timepiece, something to be evaluated and endorsed. Evelyn's message arrived through then. The aide who'd provided beverage at every family assembly. Learned you departed chamber 1247 when you're prepared to converse. I possess 40 years of data you require. I grinned the initial genuine grin in periods. Brock stated I wouldn't endure 7 days minus him. But he'd never inquired what I was accomplishing all those periods he abandoned me solitary. Never pondered why his aide knew my birth surname. Never envisioned his prize might have been recording observations. 7 days. That's all I required to demonstrate him incorrect. After that, I'd acquire the remainder of my existence demonstrating myself correct. The fobs I'd abandoned weren't capitulation, they were a proclamation of conflict. And unlike Brock, I'd already perused all the stipulations and provisions. 3 weeks had elapsed since that evening at the Grand. I'd created a schedule. Dawn deals from my room, midday strolls through City Garden, nights examining the papers Evelyn had been supplying me in cautious portions. Each dossier she distributed unveiled another stratum of the Beaumont domain's deceit. But today was distinct. Today was May 15th, our genuine commemoration time. And despite all, I'd consented to one supper just to debate the arrangements, Brock had stated on the device, his tone cautiously impartial. We need to be polite about this. The parlor on Main Boulevard was the identical one I'd utilized throughout our union. Celeste, my stylist, labored her digits through my locks with practiced accuracy. Unique event, she inquired, not acknowledging the sarcastic mockery in her query. Commemoration supper, I stated, observing my image alter into what Brock favored. Smooth, managed, costly appearing. For years, correct? How marvelous. Where's he bringing you? Le Bernardin? His preferred, where the servers knew his vintage choices, and the cook dispatched complimentary dishes to his usual board. I'd created the booking myself, realizing he'd overlook otherwise. The verification message rested in my device, right beside the 17 lawful papers my attorney had readied for tonight's true objective. The gown had priced $8,000, more than most individuals' monthly wages billed to the charge account he hadn't blocked yet. Navy, his preferred shade on me, though he hadn't remarked on my look in 6 periods. I examined myself in the shop reflector. Every bit the ideal spouse he'd cultivated, except for the memory stick concealed in my handbag containing 40 gigabytes of proof. My device vibrated as I was departing the parlor. Minor alteration. Brock's message read, Derek and Sophia joining us. Need to debate Singapore agreement. Same hour, of course. Our commemoration had turned a commerce session. I rested in the rear of the taxi, observing Manhattan fade past and entered back. Ideal. He wouldn't detect the sharpness in that solitary term. Wouldn't observe it was the initial occasion I hadn't appended a love symbol or adore you to my reply. 20 moments later, another message. Actually, parent demands we arrive to the manor. He's having something prepared. 8 p.m. The chauffeur had already veered towards Central. Alteration of intentions, I informed him, providing Harold's location in suburbia. The sarcasm wasn't missed on me. I was donning a gown worth a modest fortune to consume supper at the residence of a gentleman who'd never troubled to master my surname before it became Beaumont. Harold's manor extended across 12 hectares of groomed excellence. The rounded path was packed with vehicles. I identified Derek's luxury sedan, 2 additional investment group associates' automobiles, even Victor Liang's fresh electric car. This wasn't an alteration of intentions. This was a trap masked as supper. Clarissa answered the entrance, Harold's third spouse, younger than me at 28. Her grin contained the sort of fatigued acknowledgement I'd viewed in reflectors lately. Lena, you appear gorgeous, she stated, though her gaze said something else completely. Why did you arrive? The entrance hall opened into the primary lounging area where Brock dominated, goblet in palm, his third by the tint in his face. He glimpsed at me, absorbing the gown, the locks, the endeavor, and turned back to his discussion without recognition. Derek gestured. Sophia rested apart, sipping a cocktail with the commitment of someone who'd prefer to be elsewhere. The charming Lena. Harold thundered, emerging from his library. He pecked my face, stinking of stogies and whiskey. Though I learn you're being not so charming lately. This division foolishness, harmful for commerce. You comprehend? Evelyn emerged with a platter of bubbly. Her gaze met mine for a moment of a second sufficient for me to view she realized precisely what this was. As she passed me a goblet, her digits grazed mine. Some commemorations, she murmured scarcely audible, are about conclusions, not starts. The eating area had been arranged for 12. I identified most visaged commerce associates, their spouses, even Brock's attorney, though that awareness came later. They'd arranged this whole night to compel me back into order. I rested in my assigned spot between Derek and Victor's spouse, confronting a painting of Harold's parent, the initial Beaumont who'd constructed this domain on confidential dealings and tactical unions. Supper arrived in stages. Somewhere between the broth and seafood, Brock began his act. Amusing tale about how Lena and I encountered, he proclaimed, though no one had inquired. The area turned towards him with rehearsed focus. She was at the finance summit, totally misplaced, strayed into a financial instruments session thinking it was about artwork derivatives. He halted for chuckling that arrived too easily. She inquired if investment groups were about gardening ventures. Literally thought we were debating landscape bushes. The tale was invention. I'd been at that summit delivering my postgraduate dissertation on market tampering in developing markets. But that fact didn't suit his tale of saving a lovely idiot. Praise heaven for misplaced pups, Derek appended, elevating his goblet. They create the finest companions. Sophia's palm located mine beneath the board, a motion meant to soothe, but her compassion felt worse than the affronts. I pressed back once, then pardoned myself. Restroom, I muttered, though everyone realized females didn't dust anything nowadays. Harold's library entrance stood partly ajar. His machine display shone, overlooked in his haste to act host. I glided inside, recalling all. The bureau arrangement, the barrier vault behind an awful copy of Impressionists' Lilies, the storage unit labeled confidential. His code was scrawled on a sticky note attached to his screen. Harold 3, numeral 1936. His birth year and his preferred theater figure. These gentlemen thought they were so intelligent. Through the pane, I could view the supper board. Everyone chuckling at something. Brock was positioning now, motioning with his vintage goblet, performing the position of triumphant spouse to excellence, while his real spouse positioned in darkness, collecting data. When I returned, the discussion had moved to commerce. Asia growth debt proportions hazard evaluations. The spouses rested quiet decorative, while the gentlemen debated fortunes like board game currency. Then, Derek, intoxicated sufficient to be vicious, made his declaration. You realize what Brock is? He's a domain creator. And Lena here, she's the prize cabinet. Lovely, graceful, but ultimately, just for exhibition. The chuckling that ensued had a sharpness like they all realized the quip sliced deeper than planned. Brock elevated his goblet. Finest asset I ever created. Excellent levy perks, minimal upkeep, and she increases in worth at all the proper communal occasions. Evelyn was removing dishes, her actions intentionally sluggish. Our gaze met across the area, and in her look, I viewed 40 years of gathered anger. 40 years of observing females like me be reduced, abandoned, substituted. Her slight gesture informed me all. She'd listened it all, documented it all, was prepared. When I was. Something within me altered. Not shattered, but solidified firm and distinct as the gem on my digit that abruptly seemed like a chain. I was prepared to choose. The gem on my digit captured the glow as I strolled out of Harold's Manor that evening. Each side hurling spectrums that seemed like minuscule vows of retribution. In the vehicle, I extracted an inexpensive basic phone from beneath the rider chair, acquired with currency at a corner store where they didn't inquire queries. My digits entered out a basic communication to the sole numeral stored. Wednesday, 2 p.m. Emerald Cafe, Asian District. Evelyn's response arrived within moments. I'll bring beverage. 3 days of awaiting seemed like 3 decades. I preserved my schedule at the Grand, requested chamber service, made minor deals to keep my intellect keen. Brock had ceased phoning. His attorney was managing all now, dispatching official notes about reunion in the concern of monetary steadiness. Each note went straight to my destroyer, then to Vanessa Choi, my fresh counsel, who resided 2 hours away in New England, where Brock's network signified nothing. Wednesday arrived dull and muggy. The Emerald Cafe rested compressed between a mortuary and a store vending fake purses, its panes misted with decades of vapor from bun containers. No one from Brock's realm would ever locate themselves here, which made it ideal. Evelyn was already positioned in the rear nook, donning a sweater despite the warmth, appearing like someone's grandma who'd gotten misplaced on her path to temple. But her gaze? Those gaze contained 40 years of meticulously recorded wrath. Mrs. Beaumont, she commenced, and I interrupted her. Voss, I'm utilizing my birth surname now. She grinned, shoving a container of shortbread treats across the board. The container appeared antique, blooms depicted on top, the type your relative might utilize for stitching materials. Inside, enclosed in thin paper, rested a rouge cylinder. Rotate the base 3 times, then tug, she directed. The rouge was actually a memory stick. 16 GB of what Evelyn termed safeguard. Began gathering in 1982. She stated, tone barely above the eatery's noise, Harold's initial spouse, Adriana. She realized something was amiss with the ledgers, requested me to observe to hear. Then she had her mishap. Evelyn's digits made quotation marks around the final term. Solo vehicle, ideal climate, defective stops. After that, I preserved all. Every note, every conversation record I could reach, every lover compensated with firm funds, every regulatory submission that didn't align internal papers. The server brought beverage, and we became quiet until he departed. Evelyn dispensed with stable palms, though I observed the minor shake when she referenced Adriana. The second spouse, Beatrice, she endured longer. Intelligent lady, degree from Ivy, began inquiring the correct queries in year 4. Harold had her confined for fatigue. She endorsed the separation papers from a mental institution, surrendered all demands to evade endless care. My beverage went chilly as Evelyn described 2 decades of monetary offenses, each one painstakingly recorded on that small stick. But she preserved the worst for final. Your spouse isn't just involved. He's been preparing Derek's spouse, Sophia. There's a document path. Bloom's billed to dummy firms, lodge bookings that match with his alleged customer sessions. He's scheduling to abandon you, Lena, but first, he needs to ruin your reliability. That commemoration supper, they were all observers to your erratic conduct. Departing, abandoning your fobs, they'll depict it as a collapse. The bun container arrived, but neither of us contacted it. I was considering about Sophia's palm pressing mine at supper, pondering if her compassion was genuine or part of another scheme. That evening, I rested in my lodge chamber with my portable, the memory stick installed, browsing through Evelyn's proof. It was immense. 40 years compacted into dossiers tagged by year, by offense, by sufferer. But I required more. I required Brock's own logs to confirm all. Vanessa Choi responded my call on the second tone despite it being almost midnight. I need to form a firm. I informed her something that appears like nothing. That could be anything. When? Tomorrow. That's a haste task. It'll expense. I'll compensate triple. 2 hours north on highway. Past the departures for affluent towns where Brock's co-workers resided in their own stone cages. Vanessa's workplace occupied the second level of a structure that also contained an oral specialist and a levy expert. No stone, no contemporary artwork. Just certificates on the barrier and a brew device that had viewed better eras. She'd already prepared the papers. Shadow Lily Ventures LLC formed an offshore state, listed in New England, with a commerce location that led to a mail container that led to another firm that led nowhere. The framework is totally lawful, she clarified, pushing papers across her bureau, but intricate enough that following it would take months of committed audit examination. By then, you'll have achieved whatever you're scheduling. How do you realize I'm scheduling something? Vanessa reclined back, examining me. Because ladies who compensate triple for hasty firm don't do it for amusement, they do it for endurance. A week later, Brock departed for Asia. 5 days of sessions about growth into Eastern markets, he'd stated, though I realized from Evelyn's data that he was really establishing accounts I'd never be able to access. The cleaner, Isabella, appeared relieved when I informed her to acquire the week off. Compensated break, seasonal tidying. I clarified, I need to accomplish this myself. Alone in our attic, I became somebody else. Not the prized spouse, not the decoration, but an investigative researcher unearthing proof of my own ruin. Brock's workplace code was shamefully emotional. Our marriage time, as if that signified something to him beyond a levy benefit. His machine open, like an admission chamber. Dossiers within dossiers. Deals dated to the instant displaying clear designs. Harold would have midday meal with certain managers. Within hours, Brock would make deals in those firms. The design was so evident once you realized to search for it. In his secured compartment, the one he thought I didn't realize about, rested letters that made my belly churn. Not just about Sophia, but about me. Messages to Derek debating my psychological weakness. Ideas that I might require expert help. Schemes to have me assessed by a mental specialist Harold knew, one who'd declared in Beatrice's confinement. My palm stayed stable as I snapped each sheet, transferred each dossier to Shadow Lily Ventures' coded network storage. Every paper went back precisely where I'd located it, aligned to the tiny measure. Brock would return to a workplace that appeared untouched, while I possessed duplicates of all that could ruin him. The ultimate paper was in his personal vault. He'd concealed the code in a volume about investment guru, thinking he was intelligent. Inside, beyond the currency and precious metals, was a solitary dossier labeled Departure Plan, not for deals or commerce. For me, a schedule displaying when to submit for separation, how to assert desertion, which possessions to conceal first. My removal was planned like a combination, complete with gain estimates. I snapped it all, then rested in his hide seat, looking at the metropolis illuminations below. Somewhere out there, Evelyn was likely submitting her own summaries. Vanessa was establishing the next stage of firm frameworks, and Brock was slumbering soundly in Asia, fantasizing of domains constructed on the remains of ladies who'd believed him. He was incorrect about one item, though. I wasn't just another prize in his cabinet. I was the one grasping the mallet. The mallet in my palm abruptly seemed weightier than Brock's entire oak bureau. I placed down the symbolic tool and rose from his seat, my image captured in the dim machine display. A lady I scarcely identified, somebody tougher and more scheming than the lass who'd strolled down the passage 4 years prior. The following dawn, I resumed to my schedule at the fitness club on Central Boulevard. The basin was my haven, 50 circuits, where the realm dissolved into disinfectant and cadence. I was hauling myself out of the liquid when Sophia emerged, her athletic attire immaculate, but her visage worn, dark rings poorly hidden under makeup. Derek realizes, she stated without introduction, glancing around the vacant basin area about Brock's communications to me. He employed a private detective, had our devices duplicated. Liquid dripped from my locks onto the stone slabs. Why are you informing me this? Because whatever you're scheming, and don't offend me by feigning you're not. These gentlemen don't just become furious when trapped. They become equal. She tugged her large shades down, exposing a mark along her chin, carefully concealed, but noticeable this near. Derek's already shifting possessions abroad. Harold's been making calls to magistrates he plays sports with. They realize something's approaching. Before I could reply, she was departed, her footwear tapping across the damp ground with intent. I rested there, disinfectant scorching my nostrils, pondering if she'd been dispatched to examine me or caution me. With these folks, generosity and brutality often donned the same disguise. That night, Brock arrived residence carrying blooms, my least favored flowers, though I'd referenced it only once 3 years prior. He'd brought blossoms for every event since. When he recalled events at all, the blooms signified something. They signified he was paying notice now. Thought we could have supper together, he stated, placing them on the ledge where my fobs once rested. Like we used to. We hadn't consumed together without others present in 6 periods. I observed him dispense vintage, the fine red he usually reserved for customers, and organize dairy on a dish with unusual attention. His palms, normally so stable when endorsing million-unit agreements, showed the tiniest shake. I've been considering, he stated, settling across from me at our eating board that seats 12, but had never hosted a kin repast. We should take a holiday, just us. Maybe that spot in wilderness with no signal coverage. Recall how you adored the peaks? I'd referenced adoring peaks once on our vacation while he'd spent the entire journey on meeting calls. The fact he recalled seemed like a snare loaded with fangs. When I inquired, slicing a portion of cheese with medical accuracy. Next period or sooner, tomorrow even. His zeal betrayed him. You appear tensely, the division residing in lodges. It's not beneficial for you. He shoved a paper across the board. Fresh coverage forms, he clarified. Better protection for both of us. His gaze followed my palm as I took the instrument, observing for pause for signs of doubt. Under the board, my device seized every sheet. Vanessa Choi's program running quietly, storing pictures in Shadow Lily's coded network. You believe me, don't you? His query dangled between us like a pendant lamp about to drop. Totally. I falsified, endorsing my title with the same palm that had recorded his schemes to ruin me. 3 days later, my parent arrived from Midwest, her arrival declared by Brock himself, collecting her from airport. Something he'd never accomplished before. He carried her baggage, praised her fresh hairstyle, inquired about her yard with pretended curiosity, so refined it shone. Oh, darling, she exclaimed, pulling me aside in the galley while Brock blended her a spirit and mixer with the exact proportion she favored. You didn't inform me things had improved. He appears so committed. The terms I desired to utter accumulated behind my dentition. He's acting, parent. This is a performance where you're the viewers and I'm the accessory. And somewhere there's a conclusion that ends with me confined or deceased. Parent, I grinned. He's full of astonishments. That period became an expert lesson in Brock's capabilities. Theater productions he'd previously termed squander of period. Suppers at eateries he'd reserved months in advance. Though I realized his aide had arranged favors that dawn, a astonishment wellness day for both of us while he managed some commerce. Parent radiated under the focus, drops actually forming when he saluted her at supper, calling her the lady who nurtured such an amazing offspring. I observed from across the board as he acted the position of ideal relative-in-law, and grasped with chilly distinctness that I'd never truly viewed Brock attempt before. This was him at complete strength. The allure that had constructed his domain, aimed now at persuading my parent that her offspring was secure. The ultimate evening of her stay, she rested on my mattress in the visitor chamber, grasping my palms. Darling, you've shed pounds. And your grin, it's distinct, rehearsed. Her digits located my face bones sharper now from periods of barely consuming. Are you content? Behind her, through the portal, I could view Brock's silhouette in the corridor hearing. I'm precisely where I scheduled to be, I stated loud. Sufficient for him to listen, vague, sufficient to be factual. After parent departed, Evelyn messaged about assembling somewhere fresh. The Urban Archive perusing chamber, where she assisted instructing reading to newcomers. The sarcasm wasn't missed on me. She was instructing folks to peruse while encircled by the metropolis's most influential uneducated gentlemen who never perused the personal toll of their agreements. She scattered periodical cuttings across the weathered timber board like fortune cards unveiling my destiny. Adriana Beaumont, 1994. Drove her luxury car off a span. Ideal climate, no slide traces. Beatrice Beaumont, 2003. Confined for fatigue. Separated while drugged. Disappeared after endorsing papers. Cassandra Beaumont, 2015. Charged of theft. She didn't perform insolvency. Last known location refuge in Industrial City. Now view these. Evelyn positioned 4 images in a line. Adriana, Beatrice, Cassandra, and me, all fair-haired, all between 5'4" and 5'6", all with the same fragile frame that imaged well at philanthropy occasions. Harold selects them, she stated softly, aware of the learners around us, like audition summons. Youthful, lovely from average families awed by riches. Just clever enough to be engaging, not clever enough to be threatening. Wed them to Brock. Utilize them for looks. Then discard them in year 4, when they begin inquiring queries. Why year 4? Long sufficient to create designs of unpredictability. Short sufficient that no genuine ties form with the communal group. By year 5 you're either departed or shattered. She contacted my palm, her epidermis tissue slim, but her hold firm. You're at 4 years, 3 periods. Whatever your schemingly accomplish shit now. Adriana awaited too long. Beatrice battled too publicly. Cassandra believed the incorrect folks. I gazed at the ladies who'd borne my title before me, their visage blurring into a solitary caution. What occurred to you? I inquired Evelyn. Why did you remain? She was silent for an instant, arranging the cuttings with archivist accuracy. I was Harold's initial aide's offspring. When she perished, he provided me the position out of generosity. I was 19. Thankful, foolish. By the time I grasped what I was recording, I was ensnared too. Distinct kind of ensnare, but still an enclosure. Now I'm 62, unseen and very, very enduring. The learners around us gathered up their volumes, the archive declaring shutting hour. As we rose to depart, Evelyn passed me one final image. A youthful lady, lovely fair-haired, probably 22. Who's this? Olivia Kane. Harold had midday meal with her parent last period. She just completed from elite school. Betrothal declaration anticipated within 6 periods. Evelyn's gaze contained 4 decades of anger, compacted into focused beam. She's the next to you, unless we halt them now. Olivia Kane's image scorched in my compartment as I departed the archive. 22 years old, entire existence ahead of her, about to stroll into the same ensnare that had captured 4 ladies before her. I tucked the image into my billfold behind my old learner card. The one from before I became Mrs. Beaumont when I still had my own title in my own visions. The following dawn, I started the initial removal. $8,000 from our shared savings, sufficient to appear like decor purchasing, not sufficient to activate Brock's notice. The lender clerk didn't even flutter. Mrs. Beaumont acquiring costly items was as standard as Dawn Brew. I transformed it to currency at 3 distinct lenders, then placed it into Shadow Lily Ventures account in New England. Vanessa Choi had demonstrated me how to form a document path that appeared like decor advising charges. The Revenue Service adores records, she stated, even if it's invention as long as it's properly submitted invention. That night, Brock arrived residence at 9 instead of his usual 7. His necktie was slackened, coat off, whiskey already on his respiration from whatever tavern he'd halted at between the workplace and residence. I was in the galley making myself beverage when he staggered slightly at the portal. Misplaced the major account today, he proclaimed, dispensing himself 3 measures of Glenfiddich, though it appeared closer to 440 million in possessions gone. They stated there were worries about adherence. Can you trust that? Adherence worries at my company. I kept my visage impartial, though I realized Evelyn had dispatched nameless hints to Major's adherence official 2 weeks prior. That's regrettable, I stated, observing him empty half the goblet in one gulp. Derek thinks someone's conversing to our customers. He dispensed again his palmless stable. Says there are whispers about a regulatory probe. Ludicrous. The next day, I shifted 12,000. The day after 15 wellness sessions, I informed the one clerk who inquired, my spouse wanted me to indulge myself. She grinned knowingly, probably considering of her own spouse, who never observed such costs. Brock's imbibing increased in perfect ratio to his defeats. Every evening brought a fresh emergency, another customer withdrawing funds, another associate inquiring queries, another whisper about government participation. He'd position in his library. Calls on amplifier while he strode and imbibed. Endorsing whatever I brought him without perusing. Authority of council changes, coverage alterations, fund revisions. His endorsement got messier with each passing day. Vanessa phoned Thursday dawn from a numeral I didn't identify. Can you assemble today? Pressing. I located her at a halt spot on highway, resting in her practical vehicle, appearing like any other residential council, except for the strain in her arms. The Federal Bureau contacted me, she stated without introduction. They realize I represent you. They want to converse. My torso constricted. How did they? Harold Beaumont has been under probe for 18 periods. A previous worker named Marcus Liang submitted an informer grievance. They've been constructing a case, but they need someone with internal entry to verify. She passed me a contact card. Agent Laura Bennett. She specifically inquired for you. Did you inform them anything? Counsel-client protection. But Lena, if you're going to act, it has to be now. Once the Federal Bureau goes public with their probe, all possessions will be blocked. All you haven't shifted will be secured in disputes for years. That evening, I observed Brock dispense his 6th beverage before supper. His device rang constantly. Derek Harold attorneys, emergency handlers. Each call made him imbibe more, endorse more. Doubt everyone except the spouse quietly replenishing his goblet. Maybe you should consume something, I proposed, acting worried partner, while computing how much longer his organ could take this speed. Not famished, he grumbled, then looked at me with reddened gaze. You've been distinct lately. Calmer counseling. I falsified smoothly, mastering to embrace what I can't alter. Saturday arrived with the monthly females group assembly at Waterside Golf Society. I'd been fearing it, realizing Gloria Davenport would be there with her group of spouses who'd made game of belittling me for 4 years. But Vanessa's news had ignited something inside me, a counter ticking down to when I could cease feigning. Gloria commenced before I'd even rested down. Lena, dear, still toying with your tiny asset programs. So adorable when spouses have pastimes like kids with play galleys. The area giggled with rehearsed chuckling. Evelyn positioned in the nook, dispensing beverage unseen as background. Our gaze met for a moment of a second. Actually, Gloria, I stated, my tone carrying across the area. My holdings are up 340% this year. How's yours performing? Quiet descended like a blade. Gloria's visage went from condescending to stunned, her lips opening and closing like a creature pulled from liquid. I'm apologetic, what? She handled 340%. Would you like to view the reports? I particularly enjoyed betting against your spouse's drug firm last period. Made a fortune when their copyright got denied. You did realize about the copyright denial, correct? Gloria's visage went pale. She hadn't realized. Around the area, other spouses leaned forward, suddenly viewing me as something other than Brock's attractive addition. Though, I suppose, I proceeded, mixing sweetener into my beverage with intentional calm. Some of us favored genuine galleys to play ones, and some of us favored genuine holdings to mere imagine. Evelyn actually grinned. Not much, just a slight rise of her lips as she replenished my mug. The assembly proceeded in awed quiet, the usual chatter replaced by cautious glimpses in my direction. By night, Brock would learn about this. By dawn, Harold would realize his offspring-in-law had talons. But I didn't concern anymore. The counter was ticking down, and I was weary of being undervalued. The blast came Wednesday. I was in my lodge chamber when my device illuminated with alerts. Sophia had submitted for separation from Derek, and she'd brought proof. Not just disloyalty, 3 lovers over 2 years, but monetary deceit, concealed accounts, and the especially incriminating message chain, where Derek debated eliminating Sophia from the situation with his counsel. Brock phoned me 17 times in an hour. I responded on the 18th. "What did you inform her?" he insisted without introduction. "Inform who?" "Sophia. Derek thinks I disclosed data to her. He states you two were amicable at suppers that you must have." I informed her nothing, I stated truthfully. Sophia had located her own proof, battled her own conflict. We were similar warriors who'd never shared observations. Through the device, I could listen something smash in his workplace. He's withdrawing from the group. 20 years of association gone. He states I betrayed him for a lady. His chuckle was sour, shattered. Wasn't even attracted in Sophia. He's too aged, too clever. I was just keeping choices available. The confession should have pained, but I sensed nothing. Just made an observation in my device. Proof Vanessa might require later. You always thought you were cleverer than everyone else. I listened to Derek yelling in the backdrop. Well, felicitations, you've ruined us both. The connection went silent. Brock didn't phone back, but Evelyn messaged an hour later. Harold called crisis assembly. All associates, the domain is fracturing. I gazed at Evelyn's message for a complete minute. The terms, the domain is fracturing, shining on my display like a prediction finally realizing. My palms moved without aware idea, pulling a crimson hairpiece from my wardrobe. Acquired with currency 3 weeks prior, from a disguised store in Borough, where they didn't inquire queries. The gown was synthetic from the shelf from discount store, something Mrs. Beaumont would never don. Dark shades completed the change into nobody, anybody. Someone who didn't exist in the Beaumont's realm. Derek's workplace structure on Central Boulevard had the sort of protection that appeared remarkable, but was mostly show. I'd been there numerous times as Brock's spouse. Realized the sentries alternated midday breaks at 12:30. Realized Derek's aide, assistant, always took 45 moments to grab raw fish from the spot 3 sections over. The lift ride to the 42nd level felt infinite. In my handbag, a brown packet held printed captures of every communication Brock had dispatched about Derek. The ridicule, the disdain, the detailed schemes to pilfer his customers once the association dissolved. But the real toxin was at the base. Brock's monetary estimates for obtaining Sophia after her separation, complete with computations about her inherited riches and how to access it through union. Derek's workplace entrance was solid wood with his title in precious letters. I glided the packet underneath, listened it murmur across his ornate carpet, then strolled back to the lift without hastening. The protection lens would show a lady who could be anybody, strolling with intent, but not haste. 3 hours later, Evelyn forwarded me a message from Brock's aide. Association termination letter received from Derek Hale, effective instantly. Lawful group requesting crisis assembly. The Midland Lodge on 54th Boulevard still accepted currency if you had sufficient of it. I listed under Lena Voss, my birth surname feeling like protection. I'd finally recalled how to don. The chamber was small but tidy, with a bureau, where I arranged my portable and the disposable phone Vanessa had provided me. The regulatory informer line responded after 12 tones. First, and mechanical system. Press 1 for this, 2 for that. Like reporting monetary offenses was as simple as requesting food. Finally, a personal voice. Finance and Trade Authority application section. I need to report organized confidential dealings at Beaumont Asset Control, I stated, my tone stable as rock. I have 5 years of recorded proof, including dated deals that match with substantial non-general data. The operative, she stated her title was Amanda Reyes, stayed quiet while I outlined all. Harold's midday meals with managers, followed by Brock's perfectly scheduled deals, the dummy firms, the foreign accounts, the design so distinct a youngster could follow it. She inquired specialized queries that unveiled she grasped exactly what I was portraying. "Why are you advancing now, Mrs. Beaumont?" I looked out the pane at Manhattan's horizon, all those spires constructed by gentlemen like Harold and Brock. "Because I finally grasp that remaining silent makes me involved, and because they're scheduling to do to another lady what they did to me." After the call, I took Evelyn's 40 years of proof, duplicated onto 3 separate sticks, and positioned one in a secure box at Major Bank, one at National Bank, and one in Vanessa's workplace vault. The directions were simple. If anything occurred to me, disclose all to the Federal Bureau, the authority, and the major paper simultaneously. That night, Harold's dark luxury car pulled into our structure's lot. I observed from the attic pane as he appeared, his visage tight with something between wrath and dread. He didn't trouble with the porter, had his own fob. The benefit of a parent-in-law who possessed 30% of his offspring's group. "Where are your ledgers?" Harold's tone carried through the attic before he'd even reached Brock's library. "Parent? What's the ledgers, Brock?" Now I made myself tiny in the galley preparing brew with deliberate ordinariness, while their tones rose and fell through the barriers. My device documenting all rested against a container on the corridor board picking up every term. "Derek's out," Brock was stating, "but we can handle without. Derek's out, Major's out." Liang pulled all this dawn. The Federal Bureau was at Liang's workplace. Brock inquiring queries about our dealing designs. That's unfeasible. All we do was secure until someone commenced conversing. Harold's tone dropped threateningly. "You vowed me the spouses were managed. Said Lena was too foolish to grasp what she was endorsing." "She is," Brock maintained. "She doesn't even realize how to peruse a monetary report." I entered with the brew platter, my visage perfectly empty. The committed spouse serving beverages while her realm disgusted her like decor. They both looked at me. Harold with chilly evaluation, Brock with disdainful assurance. "Dairy." I inquired Harold. He disregarded me, turning back to his offspring. "Locate the breach. Repair it or we're all done." They labored until 2 a.m. scattering papers across Brock's library like fortune cards that might unveil their destiny. I listened Brock's machine running constantly, papers being destroyed, calls to attorneys who billed $2,000 an hour to respond phones at midnight. By 3 a.m., Brock had fainted in his seat, encircled by proof of his collapsing domain. His head rested on a pile of agreements, saliva gathering on papers worth fortunes. The powerful economic expert, reduced to an fatigued gentleman who'd constructed his seat on the remains of ladies he'd undervalued. I moved through our attic one final time, not with sentiment, but with the medical productivity of someone already departed. My garments stayed in the wardrobe. Let him clarify to folks why his spouse abandoned all behind. The ornaments remained in its containers. Conflict gems and shame precious that had never truly been mine. In my handbag, my portable, my genuine recognition, and the lending data for Shadow Lily Ventures, which now contained exactly 50% of our fluid possessions, lawfully removed over the past periods. The fobs went on the marble ledge where this had all commenced. Residence fob, vehicle fob, vault fob, arranged with armed accuracy. Next to them, a solitary memo on my personal letterhead. The costly kind he'd acquired to make me appear the position. "Examine your accounts." The porter didn't query why Mrs. Beaumont was departing at 3 a.m. with only her handbag. In their realm, the wealthy did whatever they desired whenever they desired. He'd probably viewed odder things. The autumn breeze hit my visage as I stepped onto the avenue, chilly and keen and absolutely ideal. Behind me, 23 levels up, Brock slumbered in his seat, unaware that his spouse had just launched the initial strike in a conflict that he didn't realize had already commenced. In 6 hours, he'd roused to locate his accounts depleted and the Federal Bureau approaching. The ride driver inquired where, also, and for the initial time in 4 years, I gave a location that was entirely my own. The ride dropped me at the Midland Lodge just as the sun commenced coloring Manhattan's crystal spires yellow. I compensated currency, strolled through the foyer without glancing back, and took the lift to my chamber on the 12th level. From my pane, I had an ideal vista of our structure, Brock's structure. Now, I assumed I requested chamber service. Poached eggs, fresh produce, brew potent sufficient to rouse the deceased. The ordinariness of it seemed dreamlike. At 6:52, I opened my portable and observed our shared accounts online, realizing the lenders would alert Brock the instant they opened at 7 o'clock. At 7 o'clock exactly, I updated the page. The accounts showed the mechanical splits Vanessa had submitted periods prior, activated by my official change of dwelling. $17 million reallocated according to state union law. Half of all, just as the premarital he'd demanded on had indicated. The same premarital he thought safeguarded him, but actually ensured my rights to union possessions. My device, positioned face up on the white cloth, illuminated at 7:03. Brock's image appeared, the one from our marriage where he appeared unbeatable. I let it tone through to recording. By 7:15, he'd phoned 9 times. I activated the tone documenter, broadcasting each communication aloud to the vacant chamber. Initial communication, Lena. What's occurring? The lender just phoned. There's some kind of mistake with our accounts. Fourth communication. This isn't amusing. Phone me back. We need to repair this before the exchange is open. 11th communication. What did you accomplish? What did you accomplish? 19th communication, please. Whatever you think you're achieving, we can resolve this. You don't grasp the situation you're placing me in. 28th communication. The debt calls are striking. I can't cover them minus those funds. You're ruining all we constructed. 35th communication. Lena, please. They're blocking all. The Federal Bureau is here. Lord, please respond. By midday, his tone had deteriorated from ordering to pleading. The 47th call came through as I was completing my second mug of brew. This time, I identified the numeral. His attorney, not him. Mrs. Beaumont, this is Robert Hargrove. Your spouse has engaged me to debate the abnormal shift of union possessions. We need to. I disconnected and restricted the numeral. Then I phoned Vanessa. They're frantic, she stated, and I could listen the grin in her tone. All we did was totally lawful. Those possessions were jointly possessed. You had full removal rights, and we followed the spirit of the law. He can challenge it, but it'll take periods. And by then, he'll have larger issues. That night, I was consuming supper in my chamber. An ideal portion of the fish I could actually savor now that my hunger had returned, when my device vibrated with a news warning. I activated the screen, switching to news channel. The video was lovely in its severity. Harold Beaumont, the gentleman who'd constructed a domain on other folks' defeats, being guided from his suburban palace in restraints. His gray locks was messy, his usual shield of costly outfits replaced with a creased top. Federal operatives carried containers of proof past the lenses, each one containing Evelyn's 40 years of enduring records. Government officials detained investment tycoon Harold Beaumont this dawn, the journalist proclaimed, following a years-long probe into confidential dealings, levy avoidance, and electronic deceit. Origins indicate multiple informers provided vital proof, including detailed logs spanning 4 decades. My device illuminated with a message from Evelyn, just a bubbly container symbol. Evelyn, who'd never dispatched a symbol in her existence, who'd provided these gentlemen brew while recording their offenses, had finally viewed equity arrive at Harold Beaumont's entrance. 3 weeks elapsed in odd tranquility. I assembled with federal operatives, supplied statements, observed the news reporting from my lodge chamber as the domain collapsed in current time. Derek escaped to Europe. Victor Liang admitted fault, instantly hoping for mercy. Other associates turned government proof, racing to betray each other out for lessened penalties. Then, on a Thursday night, Brock located me. I was resting at the Grand Hyatt Lounge drinking bubbly I'd acquired with my own funds. Funds earned from deals I'd made while he thought I was toying with adorable programs. He appeared like a specter donning a costly outfit. Untrimmed, sunken gaze, his designer coat creased like he'd slumbered in it. You ruined all, he stated without introduction, positioning too near, spirits on his respiration. At 6 p.m., I turned on my lounge seat, met his reddened gaze directly. I exposed all. There's a distinction. We had a existence. You had a existence. I had a position in your act. I took a gulp of bubbly, letting the fizz calm before proceeding. You stated I wouldn't endure 7 days without you. It's been 21 days and you're the one who appears like he's sinking. He extended for my arm, his digits closing on air as I tugged away. You don't grasp what you've accomplished. My parents confronting 20 years. The group is gone. All is exactly what you constructed it to be. A structure of papers. I just ceased holding my respiration. His visage twisted, wrath replacing hopelessness. He elevated his tone, drawing looks from other visitors. You foolish wench. The server, a lady about Evelyn's age, stepped forward. I'm going to have to request you to depart. Do you realize who I am? Brock insisted. Someone who's bothering our visitors, she replied calmly. Protection arrived within moments. Two gentlemen who escorted Brock out with expert productivity while he yelled about attorneys and litigations. The server returned to her post, cleaned a goblet, and set another bubbly glass in front of me. On the establishment, she stated. That was long delayed. 2 days later, Sophia and I were summoned to declare on the same day, though we'd never organized. She appeared sturdier than I'd ever viewed her. No longer the fading bloom at supper gatherings. We rested in the tribunal corridor, not conversing, but comprehending all. Evelyn's statement came final and lasted 3 days. She brought proof for all, every payoff, every menace, every lady they ruined. She spoke about Adriana's mishap, Beatrice's confinement, Cassandra's fabricated insolvency. She presented 4 decades of proof with the accuracy of someone who'd been readying for this instant her entire existence. Why did you preserve all of this? The accuser inquired. Evelyn adjusted her lenses, looked directly at Harold where he rested at the accused's board. Because I realized that someday someone would be courageous enough to utilize it, someone like Mrs. Voss. The accuser looked puzzled. You mean Mrs. Beaumont? No, Evelyn stated firmly. I mean, Miss Voss. She reclaimed her title, she reclaimed all. That evening, Vanessa phoned with news. The accuser says Evelyn's proof alone ensures verdicts. Harold will never view liberty again. Brock's looking at 15 to 20. I positioned at my lodge pane looking out at the metropolis illuminations. All those spires that would keep positioning long after the Beaumont domain had turned to powder. The spires appeared tinier from Vanessa's workplace pane. Or maybe I was just viewing them differently now. She pushed the ultimate separation order across her bureau, a paper that weighed nothing but altered all. The magistrate's decision came through this dawn, she stated, unable to conceal her contentment. The residence, 60% of remaining fluid possessions, plus your separate holdings remains untouched. The tribunal had been crowded 3 days prior. Brock rested beside his attorney, donning the same outfit he'd donned to our marriage, though it hung loose on his build now. Strain had etched away his youthful shine, leaving someone I scarcely identified. His attorney, Hargrove, had attempted one final hopeless maneuver. Mrs. Beaumont gained from these claimed offenses. She existed in opulence, enjoyed the returns. Vanessa rose smoothly, extracting her portable. Your dignity, I'd like to broadcast audio from Mr. Beaumont's personal audio device, dated 14 periods ago. Brock's tone filled the tribunal clear and disdainful. She wouldn't grasp a monetary report if I sketched her images. That's the allure of wedding someone ornamental. She's too foolish to inquire complex queries. Judge Elizabeth Wong, a lady who'd probably listened to every variation of this tale, looked directly at Brock. Mr. Beaumont, it appears you were quite incorrect about your spouse's cleverness. Perhaps, if you'd been less assured of her foolishness, you might have been more cautious with your offenses. Now, grasping the order, I endorsed my title, Lena Voss. On every line, Vanessa indicated. Each endorsement seemed like recovering a piece of myself I'd overlooked existed. The Informer Award should process next period, Vanessa appended. Between yours and Evelyn's, you'll have more than sufficient for your schemes. Evelyn was awaiting in the foyer donning a fresh outfit, the initial time I'd viewed her in anything but attendant garments. We strolled 2 sections to the structure where Brock's group used to function. The list in the foyer still had an empty space where Beaumont Asset Control had been noted. 3rd level, Evelyn stated, pressing the lift switch. The owner gave us a bargain. Apparently, having an organization for mistreatment survivors is better publicity than having vacant workplaces. The area was humble. 4 chambers that had once been an oral clinic. But the panes faced dawn, capturing morning glow, and there was something artistic about constructing our destiny above Brock's debris. Revival Organization. Evelyn perused from the interim marker we'd suspended that dawn, emerging from remains. Our initial customer arrived that midday. Cassandra Liang, spouse of a drug director who'd been altering research data. She grasped a dossier of papers like a flotation device. "My spouse says I'm suspicious," she murmured, looking between Evelyn and me. "Says I wouldn't grasp the research anyway." Evelyn leaned forward, her 40 years of expertise compacted into absolute assurance. "Every paper tells a narrative, Mrs. Liang. We're going to assist you compose a fresh conclusion." 2 weeks before holiday, my parent phoned. "I'm coming to stay," she proclaimed, not inquiring. "I need to view my offspring." I'd relocated into a 2-chamber flat in District, tinier than the attic by far, but full of pains and glow. The galley was tight, but operational, and I'd been instructing myself to actually prepare, not just warm things up. Parent arrived with 1 valise and 1,000 queries she was too courteous to inquire. I met her at airport myself, driving my own pre-owned vehicle. Dependable, useful, unseen in flow. "You appear distinct," she stated, examining my visage as we rested in airport flow. "Younger, somehow brighter." That period, we didn't converse about Brock, or the hearing, or the funds sitting in accounts I could reach but rarely contacted. We conversed about the organization, about Evelyn's wry wit, about the ladies who came to us carrying mysteries like rocks. I prepared holiday supper, bird that was slightly arid, filling that was ideal, fruit relish from a container, because some customs deserve to endure. Parent observed me move around my galley, comfortable in my area in a way I'd never been in the attic. "You're content," she stated, not a query, but a disclosure. "I'm liberated," I amended. "Then re-evaluated," which might be the same thing. She remained an extra period, slumbering in the visitor chamber I'd colored soft hue, perusing volumes while I labored on organization cases. On her final evening, she embraced me the way she used to when I was tiny, before I mastered to act contentment instead of sense it. "I'm proud of you," she murmured, "not for enduring him, but for becoming yourself." 6 periods had elapsed since I'd strolled out of the attic. Season was arriving in District, and I positioned in the portal of the residence. My residence now, though I'd only returned to endorse the ultimate papers. The chambers echoed with emptiness, Brock's items long since eliminated by relocators his parent employed. My device rang. Evelyn, her tone vitalized in a way that 40 years of quiet never permitted. "We have a fresh customer," she stated. "Senator Harrison's spouse. She's been recording election funding breaches for 2 years." I looked at the fobs in my palm, the ones I'd reclaimed, the ones I'd abandoned, the ones I'd gained. They were weightier now, burdened with intent instead of retribution. Through the pain, I could view Olivia Kane strolling past with her fresh betrothed. Not Brock, who was serving 3 to 5 in low protection, or any Beaumont gentleman, but someone her own age who grasped her palm like it signified. "Prepared for cycle 2? Evelyn inquired. I considered about the 17 ladies who'd come through our portals in just 3 periods, for had successfully departed their unions with their possessions intact. 13 were still gathering bravery and records, each one mastering what I'd mastered, that liberty isn't bestowed. It's acquired 1 paper at a time. I was born prepared, I informed Evelyn, closing the entrance on the empty residence. I just didn't realize it until someone attempted to persuade me I was nothing. The bolt snapped with conclusiveness. I strolled to my vehicle, hurling the fobs to the property representative who'd vend this memorial to Brock's vanity. The returns would support the revival organization for another year, maybe 2. As I drove back to District, back to my tinier, cozier existence, I considered about Adriana, Beatrice, Cassandra, the spirits of spouses past who'd strolled this route before me. They'd been shattered or muted or deleted. But their narratives, preserved in Evelyn's cautious records, had rescued me. Now Evelyn and I were rescuing others, 1 endorsement at a time, 1 lady at a time, constructing a span out of the remains of the domain we'd torched down. My device vibrated with a message from Sophia. Beverage tomorrow? I have someone you should encounter. She needs our assistance. I grinned, joining into flow, heading residence. My genuine residence. Not an enclosure with an entrance keeper and a stone ledge where I'd finally place down my fobs and stroll toward this instant. This existence, this liberty that appeared exactly like I'd always envisioned it would. Ordinary, unexciting, and absolutely mine. If this narrative of planned retribution had you applauding for Lena, press that approve icon right now. My preferred section was when she arranged those fobs on the marble ledge and departed without glancing back. What was your preferred instant? Place it in the remarks below. Don't overlook more exciting narratives like this. Join and press that alert icon so you never overlook a post.